Hi guys. Okay, so today we're going to talk about the four horsemen of the apocalypse by the Gottman couple. They're doctors, and they have gotten to 96% certainty of whether they can tell whether a couple is going to stay together or break up, based on the research from like 2,000 couples, and in which they collected, all kinds of physical samples from them, from sweat to blood, etc., heart rate, blood pressure, etc. So they found out what really causes people to start to separate emotionally. Okay, and this is kind of one of the aspects of their program that um, they have come to the conclusion of, like, they call it the four horsemen of the apocalypse. So it's like the four things that will trigger people to kill the relationship. Okay, we're gonna go over that. I'm Lakshmi Anand. You can call me Lox for short, as in Goldilocks or Dreadlocks, both will work. I am an addiction professional, and I want to talk to people about that love somebody who is addicted or have behavioral issues or has alcoholism issues, and that it could be your children, your parents, somebody that you love, in love with, a spouse, etc. But there's certain ways, as a therapist in treatment centers and lots of background. I have a master's degree in this field, or in as social work with an addiction certification, but I've been in this field for quite a while. I have decades of experience, and so it's not just one aspect that we have to talk to. We have to come at this from all kinds of directions. And if you want to increase the chance of somebody that you love to get help, there's certain things that you need to know. And with all good intention, you may be thwarting those chances, unknowingly, and with the best intention, the sincerest intention. And or you don't know, or you just may be really frustrated, and you want these people, with this person, to get help. You want your person to get help, your child, your parents, whoever, you want them to get help. And but there's something here. I'm not just gonna talk about this from a psychological point of view. I want to talk about this. I come from a blend of spiritual point of view, as well as, and not religious, but spiritual, as well as psychological, and blend the two, because at the highest levels they are not separate. Okay? All right. So the four horsemen of the apocalypse, this is something I teach in my groups. Let's go over it and get you an idea. You can look up the Gottman material. It's on YouTube. It's all over the internet. But let's go over it here. And so the first one, and I have my notes here, okay? And all in my material, in my groups. Hopefully, if you want a copy of the material, please let me know. And we can put it up on my website and get it there. And I'll put a link if you all are wanting something. So the first one, believe it or not, is criticism. Okay, so that's attacking someone's character or a behavior even, and instead of saying, I felt this way when you did that, in a non-judgmental fact-based way. And here's the thing. So people have reasons for things that they do. And criticism is different than a complaint. So what is this difference? Okay, so again, criticism is about them, right? It's about you did this, you always do this, or you never do this, right? Those are absolute words, and that makes it even worse. So you can say, you know, you did that wrong, or I don't like the way you look. You know, instead of owning why it makes you uncomfortable, how your life is affected by an objective way of saying something, not subjective. Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean is that, okay, so there's a saying that the highest form of thinking is that you can state the difference between your opinion and a fact, or even in somebody else. Is that an opinion, or is that actually a fact? So just like the old, if you show, it was a investigative police show or something a long time ago. I can't remember what the name of it was, but he'd say, when he'd go talk to somebody, he'd say, just the facts, ma'am, just the facts. Not your opinion, a fact. So I can say, you know, that doesn't look good. Okay, right? According to who does it not look good? See, that's an opinion. And so you, instead of saying, owning it and saying, to me, I don't like red and blue together in an outfit, something like that. That's you stating that what you don't like, that's something you don't like, you're owning that. And when red and blue are together, for instance, or orange and green, or whatever, or those colors don't match, or whatever you're saying in the way what you like. So you're stating a fact about your preferences, okay? Which kind of nobody can really argue with that, right? They could, but again, if somebody's arguing with you about your preferences, there's another issue there. So again, we want somebody who listens to our preferences and lets us have our preferences, and hopefully you are also letting others have their preferences. And for instance, if we say something like, that person, or you're being lazy, according to who? So let's say somebody takes a nap in the middle of the day. Why are you being lazy? That's an opinion. Lazy is an opinion, because, for instance, like in Mexican culture, it's customary for people to take a nap in the middle of the day. It's a siesta. So in their culture, that's not being lazy. That is actually a survival necessity. In the heat of the day, people just take a nap. So things are relative. So it's really important to start to say, to know what a fact is and what an opinion is, okay? If you've got questions about that, please go ahead and make a comment, and maybe we'll do a live on that one day and talk about the difference between facts and opinions. I really like the idea of lateness and tardiness. Some people say if you're 5 minutes early, you're still late because you're not 15 minutes early. Or some people are like, I'm on time when I'm fashionably late, 30 minutes late, you know. It's relative. And so to people, like, I'm on time, I'm right here on the dot at that time. So again, it's relative. But to be clear, you know, if somebody wants you to be at a certain place or whatever, you know, you're here, you know, 5 minutes after the time we agreed upon, and that's a fact. Like if somebody showed up like that, you're 5 minutes, if you agreed upon a time and they're 30 minutes late, You can state that is a fact, right? Not criticizing, not judging. That's the key, is not saying things in a judgmental way, but you're attaching a behavior or a character or a preference of yours. And if you attach it to judgment, that's where there comes to be a problem. That's where there starts to be a problem which somebody can be offended by. And it creates a distance between you. Okay, instead of owning what your preferences are. All right, or your requirements or your standards. Could be your standard. You know, somebody isn't stepping up to take their responsibilities, for instance, like what you think the responsibilities are. They may have a different idea. Or they may, you may have a standard about how you want somebody to interact with you, a preference, standards, or deal breakers, okay, or boundaries. And it's not that the other person is wrong for living their life the way they want to live it, but does it align with yours? That's the question. So that leads us to the next one. The next one, which can, the complaint or the criticism can lead off into the next one, which is defensiveness. So you've made a criticism on somebody, even a complaint. Some people will even get upset about a complaint, and that's okay. But they can become defensive, let's say, or you can become defensive. So defensiveness is the next killer. It's the next horseman of the killer of the relationship, of the apocalypse of the relationship. So defensiveness is a really, really common and tough one. And these are also in order of destructiveness of the relationship. Instead of becoming defensive, like, okay, so you're late for dinner. Somebody wants you to be there at 7, dinner's on the table at 7, okay. And you get there an hour later at 8 o'clock because you were in traffic. The person at home is upset because they worked hard on making dinner and they wanted to eat. They were hungry, and they're like, you're late for dinner. Okay, so now it's not my fault. There was traffic, right? I had to stop and get milk, and there was a line, and la la la. And why are you on me right when I walk in the door? Defensiveness. Okay, instead of saying, so it doesn't mean you can't have your feelings, but defensiveness will be that you are just dropping into that reason why their feelings are invalid. But the thing is that they're still having feelings. You might try instead to initially say, I'm sorry that your feelings are I can see that you're upset. You don't have to apologize necessarily to start. I can see you're upset. I really wish I could have been here when, to eat dinner with you. Do you want to know what happened? Or do you I can see the frustration. So you align with them and you try to hear them out and mirror their feelings. You reflect, mirror their feelings back to them by saying, you rewording what they say. So they're like, I have been cooking all day and I'm just hot and sweaty. And so you can come back and say, gosh, you've been putting a lot of effort into getting this meal together, and I was not here to enjoy it with you and sit with you and talk with you, and I can see that's important to you. And that way the person is going to feel heard and understood, and you will actually can build more of a bond with that person by helping them feel understood. Then you can say, do you want to hear what happened? And then maybe we can think about how, maybe you have some suggestions on what I should do, like if that's gonna be happen again, or let's try not to let it happen again, or if it does happen again, what do you want me to, would you like me to do? So you come up with a solution together. Okay, so that's two. So we've got criticism and defensiveness. Next, actually, contempt. Contempt is beyond criticism. Contempt is a form of disrespect, such as sneering, huffing, or here we go again, right? Or eye rolling, right? These can be tricky because you gotta, I've been told I didn't even know I'd be rolling my eyes, or like have a little, somebody said, oh, I had a smirk on my face, which it was just me trying to be pleasant actually, but they may, it may have come across, you want to really try to come across, be sincere and not laugh at the person or huff or say, oh my God, throw your head back, and we really got to watch these things. It's really, contempt is really destructive. It's like the third highest level. It's like out of the four, it's 3 out of 4. It's not saying it may not happen, or especially calling somebody a name calling. Woo, that's called character assassination. It's just a really big form of disrespect. Raising the voice, curling the lip, kind of like a snarl or something. Of course, any kind of aggressiveness, contemptuousness. It's very destructive in relationships. So here's it's there should always be respect. Just because we're in a personal relationship with someone does not give us the right or the privilege to disrespect that person. And somehow, I also, used to think that was okay. It's not. It's not okay. Respect is vital all the way through a relationship, despite how many years there is in the relationship. Intimacy and familiarity is not a privilege to disrespect or a right to disrespect somebody, and will really destroy the relationship pretty quickly. If not physically, at least emotionally. That person is going to be more, can they really truly open up to you after that kind of trust is betrayed? It's going to take time to rebuild that, if that's the case. And also, if people are doing that to you, that's a no-go. Hopefully you have boundaries with that, and set boundaries with that. That's another thing we can talk about in another video, about this. What do you do about that? So, and the last one is stonewalling, and this is the worst of the 4. Okay, there's healthy time out. Healthy ways to take time out or to get a space so that you can process. If you're a slow processor of your feelings, like you just get frozen, or which happens, you need some time to think about something. Maybe you come home and you're just not ready to talk about anything. You need some time and space, and say, hey, I need a few minutes. Or the conversation gets, if you get into an argument, which happens in healthy relationships actually, then if you need to take time out, if somebody says, hey, I need a time out for at least 20 minutes, okay? You've got to bring that blood pressure down. You've got to bring that heart rate down, and all your signs, whatever your signs are, all of that's got to come back down, because what they found, what the Gottmans found, is that nothing will be resolved when the ego is flared up. Nothing's going to be resolved because that ego is triggered. Okay, that's kind of what it is. It's in the body, right? And so it's got to be brought down, and hopefully you'll get to a place where both of you can kind of have a fair argument and start to trust each other that, you know, you're working together on these things, you're in this together, and that you can really trust each other to go deep with issues. But this can take time, depending on where you're coming from. And there's lots of skills to learn, and people think it's something that you should just know, you know, how to have these skills, but it's not really the case. There is, you know, nonviolent communication is something to learn. How do you talk to somebody? Set boundaries and standards. Tell them your preferences, what your needs are. Especially when you're dealing with one person who's got anxious attachment, who's like the chaser, and the avoidant, who is the runner type person. And these are not diagnoses, okay? But these are like ways that each of us deal with relationship. And depends on who we're dealing with also. So with some, that's another video. If you'd like to know more about that, then we can talk more about that. A lot of great teachers on this topic. So if you want to know more about those things or have resources on that, please let me know. This is so important when you're dealing with people who have depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, addiction, alcoholism. And it's important for somebody, if you're the person who is the one who loves people with these issues, who is kind of the, you know, the one who you would feel like that you're holding things together, okay, for the other person. Or you may be the one, if you're the person who's got depression, anxiety, or some, you know, kind of addictions are on you about being addicted, or have an eating disorder or a gambling issue. You know, you may want to let them see some of this material and say, hey, you know, just because I have these problems doesn't mean you get to treat me poorly, right? Or you don't get to yell at me, right? It's not going to help. So both of you need to try to have these skills. Try to set boundaries. Try to have your standards of, you're not going to allow abusive talk or abusive behavior. And that's a general term, okay? I'm not saying abusive, aggressive is actually far more subtle and pervasive than we often think of. It's just not domestic violence, okay? Or it's not just violence. There's actually a term called nonviolent communication by Marshall Rosenberg, who invented that term and wrote that book, great book. And we want to, so violence can be in communication, is often in communication when it's assaulting people's sovereignty, etc. So deep topic. If you want to know more about it, please let me know. I'd love to go into it because it's very good information. Okay, the last one, the stonewalling. So back to the stonewalling. So let's say you've called a timeout. The person who calls a timeout in a relationship, in a situation, like, okay, let's come back in a couple of hours after we eat. So we're going to have a nice dinner and let's eat so we can not get our tummies upset, and we'll talk about it because I'm hangry right now and I need to chill out, and we'll come back to this. So the person who calls timeout needs to be the person who also ideally is the person who comes back and says, okay, let's finish up that conversation, okay? Even if it's, you're putting that conversation off till you have therapy or the weekend or when the kids aren't around or whatever it is, then ideally, okay, and relationships are not ideal, they're often messy, okay, but ideally that's the person who comes back and finishes the conversation and says, okay, initiates. That will make the person who's chasing, or the person who is kind of having to hold it in, feel validated when the person who called timeout and said, I don't want to talk about this right now. Which is, if somebody says that, that's setting a boundary, and please don't follow them into another room or say, if you leave, don't come back, or something like that. Don't do that. Okay? Let somebody have a timeout and to come back to, because it's just not going to be resolved. Okay? You'll have a chance to resolve it if you know that each of you can take a timeout, okay, and process those feelings, process those emotions, and do something else to calm down. But let's say if you just ghost someone, that's the term they use these days. You ghost someone and you like hang up the phone. You don't even say, like, well, let's talk about this later. Set a time like tomorrow, or but you just avoid them for the next few days. Give one answer, one word answers to questions. You give the cold shoulder, essentially. You're not warm. This is some of the notes. So you can disengage, you shut down. It is devastating, absolutely, over time, devastating to the relationship. Please, if you're an avoidant type personality, please find help to be able to healthily, process these emotions. And I'm not saying help as in, there's something defective about you. There's a reason that you're acting this way, okay? Who likes arguments, right? But it's going to happen. And what the Gottmans found out is that, and this video is getting kind of long. What the Gottmans found out was that it wasn't the fact that people had conflict and how much of it. It was how fast did they repair the conflict. And that can be, even if you don't have a chance to talk about it, at least you can say, hey, I really, want to repair this with you. I really want to, resolve this with you. Maybe we can't do it right now, but, we're in this together. We're on the same team. And that's really the key, is how fast can you repair. Okay, that's not the only secrets here, but it's huge as far as staying emotionally close. Even if you can't resolve it right then, at least you can know that you let the other person know that you still love them, you care, but you've got to deal with your feelings, and that you're still on their team. Okay, so if you have questions, parts of this that you'd like to know more about, please let me know in the comments. This is so important. Relationship is the rocket jet, or the jet rocket to awakening. Remember this. So if you want to go set up in a mountain somewhere like the sages did, that's a way to awaken. Yes, be in a monastery or something like that, or but relationship is the way, is the fastest way for you to awaken. And that's one reason why it's intense. So you don't have to separate from people to awaken. That's the point. You can, if you're called to a difficult relationship, you're blessed, okay? Doesn't mean that you're stay in abusive relationships, okay? When you're physically, I'm not saying do that, okay? Please don't take it as that. We'll discuss all of this. Stay tuned, okay? But there's something to learn in every interaction. Okay, have a great day, to have a great life. Be blessed. See you later.